Jeremy, did you have a comment as well?
那我来再补充一下好了。其实这个 Open 的是最近在谈 Open， 其实在 Linux 的世界以前就 Open 了哈。那为什么现在大家会谈得更多？是因为说有一些终端机，像手机的运用，像很多 PC 或者是说上网机的运用，已经开始慢慢形成。就像刚刚这个 Roger 讲，就是说，他有这个 idea， 拿第一名的产品去跟一些他 potential 的一些 carrier 去谈，那这个 idea 很好，那下一步怎么办？那就要有人就是要把那种概念，这种原型机，然后呢，把大家的运用想要到的东西，把它做成一个产品。那个产品呢，它有竞争力。就我们刚刚讲那个 core competence， 刚刚讲的那个 collaboration of community 跟 insights 就要出来了。有一种需求，然后呢，怎么把它做到大家用的很方便又很便宜情况之下，然后让这个量能够把它放大。所以我是觉得在这阵子在谈这个 open 的，其实也给大家很多的商机啦。讲老实话，就是说以前我们在被所谓的那个 Wintel 哈 dominate 大概20几年嘛，那其实这个造福大家没有错，那也让大家能够有这个标准的上面去发挥。那其实这个就是说最上层的在 Wintel 他们基本上已经帮大家制定好一些游戏规则的情况之下呢，他们拿了最大的利益，但是他们也花了最大的功夫，那让大家 developer 其实能够发挥的空间不这么大。不这么大的意思就是说，那你的 value add 相对上就比较小，那大家可以做的生意或者是拿到利润就比较少。那在从这个 open 的角度来看的话呢，就是说有这么多的想象空间，表示说你有更多的发挥的机会，那表示说你的利润可以更大。好，那这样子的话，大家其实这个整个经济呢才会往多元化的方向去走。那更多的 device， 那available 在这个 market 上面，大家的受惠就会更多。谢谢。
Thank you very much. I wanted to just stick with the Google theme. We will come back to Intel a little bit later in the panel. To me, I'm a handset analyst. Actually, I was originally a semiconductor analyst for 8 years or so, working with Dan Heiler, who some of you may know is our Asia-Pacific region semiconductor analyst, who unfortunately was meant to be here today. His Mandarin is a lot better than mine, but he was detained in Hong Kong. Merrill Lynch today downgraded Intel, so Judah was very happy to hear this. But he's also been responding to this. But to me, I'm fascinated by the way that these new business models are breaking down the traditional barriers that we see between the different nodes of the supply chain. 10 years ago, I remember the handset industry was very worried that Microsoft was going to try and come in and take the same value that it took in the PC industry from the mobile industry. And that was one of the reasons for the consortium of handset companies to take over Symbian. Ironically, 10 years later, what looks like to be a very strong contender in the operating system space is being offered for free, a complete reversal of the PC supply value chain. And I'm fascinated on how this changes things for the players. Something that's happened in the handset industry this year is something that's never happened before, is that if you look at the top 5 market share by revenue, which is of course much more important than unit share, but for the first time, I think ever, the top 5, 2 of the top 5 players have dropped out of the top 5. That's Motorola and Sony Ericsson. And the 2 new number 4 and 5 in terms of revenue share are, of course, Apple and BlackBerry. So there's huge changes in the handset industry, and I'm interested in how the value shares are going to be broadening or narrowing for the different nodes. And Bob, we were talking about this earlier. How do you think this change, and I guess particularly as Android is going to change the way, as a major supplier to the handset industry?
Yeah, ST, as you know, is the number 2 in the world in chipset providers for the handset industry, mobile industry. And for the last more than 10 years, we've been the leading supplier to Nokia, of course, who's been a leading player. And a year or so ago, after probably 2 or 3 years of discussion, but a year or so ago, we made a move inside our company, obviously a strategic move to acquire more intellectual property and diversify our customer base. That's one of the reasons for doing it. And to become more independent as a platform provider, less dependent on Nokia, although Nokia is a great customer, but less dependent on Nokia because we saw this fragmentation of the market in the handset, the basic mobile phone, We saw the white brands, gray brands in China, emergence of China standards. We saw 4G coming and so on and so forth. And we saw the OS wars changing, and Google's Android platform was a disruptive change, clearly. And it actually allows people like ourselves to engage with operators, not just box builders. We need to do work with box builders, handset manufacturers, but have an earlier engagement with the operator about the types of features that they want that we can provide to the box builder, the handset manufacturer, in advance. Before, it was a master-slave relationship where the master was a handset builder, because they had a closed OS. They told you what they wanted. They worked with you as an ASIC provider or as a system provider. Now it's a much more open game for us. It allows us to build platforms ahead of time and now sell them to the operators and the handset manufacturers because of the openness of the system. Okay, so we can be, if you like, we're no longer controlled in that sense by the handset manufacturer, but we can engage in advance and add features in advance. And that's a big advantage for us. We saw this as you know, in the set-top box business, digital consumer business, maybe 10 years ago. Same thing happened. Was that, of course, before it was controlled by the box builders, and then moved to the semiconductor guys. Now we have much more control over our destiny as a semiconductor supplier, and in freedom talking directly to cable TV operators or broadcasters. And I think that's what Android has allowed. It's enabled them. Okay.
Tudor, could I ask you what your thoughts are as another company that sits right in the middle of the wireless community?
Yeah, I mean, there is no question that freedom creates value. And I think what we're starting to see, not just in the handset market, but in the whole of this mobile computing market, is the sort of breaking down of the Wintel system that we've been so familiar with for better and for worse. I mean, it's done us quite well over the last 20 or so years, but I do think now that's starting to show cracks. And we're starting to see that, as I'm sure we'll come to later, on the hardware side, but also on the software side. And it's really time that people sort of just accepted that things are changing, and this new way of doing things, this new freedom, is undoubtedly very powerful. And it's not clear to me, and I'm sure it's not clear to many people yet, how it's all going to end up and where the value is going to end up. But what is becoming clear is that we're seeing more innovation right now and more opportunities. And I think that's an exciting time. And I think it's going to do the whole industry a lot of good. But it's too early for me to say what the end point is at this point.